What is a fighting game? Well, a fighting game isn't as simple as the name would make it seem. It isn't just a game that you fight in. There's a lot more to it than just that. At its most basic, it is a game where you and your opponent try to attack each other until ultimately one of you loses all of your health, resulting in a win or loss. But what makes it interesting is how you reach that outcome. Do you rush the opponent down and send out a flurry of attacks? Do you stay far away from them and whittle down their health till nothing is left? Do you get close to them and make them guess if you will grab or strike, resulting in high damage? Or maybe even a little of everything. All of these represent their own archetypes, being rushdown, zoner, grappler, and shoto, or balance. So we've spoken about your options in fighting games, but what about the things that stay true for everyone? Well, those are universal mechanics. The most simple example being something like the ability to walk or having a health bar. But they get a lot more in depth than that. Let's take something like special moves, for example. In almost all fighting games, you have to do what's called a motion input to do a special move. Motion inputs will be explained a lot more depthly later in the video, but the simple idea is you do a motion on the controller that corresponds to the special move in order to execute the move. But that's enough about how fighting games work. Let's get into the history of them. Cue the over-the-top dramatic music. Now, obviously, I won't be talking about every fighting game, but instead just the ones I think were the most influential, unique, or in general ones I think are interesting to talk about. The first fighting game was Heavyweight Champ for arcade by Sega in 1976. While this game is considered a boxing game, it is more like a hybrid boxing and fighting game, setting the standard and opening the doors for more fighting games to be released. While it's nothing to write home about, it's still important to the history of fighting games. Next in line is Yi Ar Kung Fu in 1985. It is commonly believed to be the first true fighting game. One thing that sets this game apart from the others at its time was that it was the first game to include women as playable characters, a nice step into a more inclusive world. Street Fighter I, being released in 1987, was the beginning of the ever-popular series, and was the first game to feature motion input. A motion input is, well, a motion that you input in order to do a special move. An example being turning the movement stick from down to forward to perform a quarter circle, which would let you do a Hadouken, or doing a Dragon Punch, or a Z input, where you would go from forward to down, and then finish in a down-forward position, essentially making a Z, which would get you a Shoryuken, or as called in this game, a Dragon Punch. The next game released around this time in 1991 was Fatal Fury. This game was heavily inspired by Street Fighter and featured its now iconic character Terry. Terry has been added into a lot of other fighting games as a collab character like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate or Street Fighter VI. It also had a very unique universal mechanic where you could fight on two different areas by doing an animation where you would jump backwards or forwards. Next up is Mortal Kombat. Being released in 1992, it was a very unique game, having all of its characters be real people who were motion captured and put into the game, as well as having a block button as opposed to the standard of holding back to block. Another revolutionary fighting game was Virtua Fighter, being released in 1993. It was the first 3D fighting game. While the name 3D fighting game was likely given to it because of its 3D models, that isn't what makes it a 3D fighter. A 3D fighting game is better defined by its sidestepping and dynamic movement over a 3D plane. The next game was Aggressors of Dark Combat in 1994, which despite being made completely 2D, was a 3D fighting game due to its usage of things like sidestepping. It also expanded upon motion inputs by having one of the hardest in fighting game history, being the Bobby Dance. In order to input the Bobby Dance, you must first get a back grapple, and then do the required motions 8, 3, 7, 9, 2, and B on a very tight time frame. Then, a very odd entry, the Street Fighter movie, being released in 1994. While this movie kinda sucked, being rated at 11% on the tomato meter and at 20% on the popcorn meter on Rotten Tomatoes, it was still a large step towards fighting games becoming more recognizable. Next is the first crossover fighting game. Coming out in 1996 was X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Despite being released almost 30 years ago, it is still renowned as one of the best fighting games ever made. In 1998, Arc System Works released their first fighting game, Guilty Gear. Guilty Gear has a very diverse cast of characters, which makes all of them feel very unique. It also has one of its most iconic mechanics called instant kills. Instant kills are extremely risky, but result in instantly killing the opponent that is hit. Guilty Gear is a personal favorite series of mine when it comes to fighting games. Next up is an odd entry being Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo 64. While it's debated if this game is actually considered a fighting game, I'm still going to include it in this list because of it being the reason that platform fighters exist. Next up, one of the most iconic and well-known fighting games, Street Fighter III Third Strike, being released by Capcom in 1999. Third Strike featured its parry mechanic, known to be one of the best parry mechanics in fighting games. It is so loved due to it being a perfect balance of risk and reward, rewarding skill and dedication towards learning the mechanic. To parry the attack, the player has to face their opponent head-on and flick their stick towards the oncoming attack, which when done with correct timing would result in a parry, causing the player to take no damage and be able to use their own action instantly. Released in 2005 was Urban Reign, known as the first free-roaming fighting game. It was seen as very realistic for its time, and its free-roaming aspect let you move freely around maps. While this free roam aspect was not taken on by many other fighting games, it was still something that set it apart from others. Next is Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo HD Remix, being released in 2007 for the PlayStation. Its gameplay closely resembles something like Tetris. This game was very unique and stretched the idea of what really was a fighting game. Skullgirls, being released in 2012, was a fighting game that featured only women as characters. It is also known for its very unique art style. Then, in 2015, Skullgirls 2 Encore was released, and they stopped having only women characters. Next, in 2017, was Guilty Gear Xrd Rev 2. This was the final release of Guilty Gear Xrd, which was made by Arc System Works after they regained their copyright to Guilty Gear. Guilty Gear Xrd was the first Guilty Gear game to feature 3D models. It also featured much more difficult characters than many other fighting games, characters like Answer. It is known to be a very hard Guilty Gear game, yet is still played very consistently and competitively. Next up, and one of my personal favorites, Guilty Gear Strive. Guilty Gear Strive is the most recent Guilty Gear game, which was revealed at EVO 19. It shows how Arc System Works has become much more comfortable with using 3D models in their games, and has a beautiful art style. It was released in 2021. Next, being released in 2023, is another favorite of mine, and a controversial entry on this list, Your Only Move is Hustle. I really like this game because it changes a lot of what makes a fighting game. Being inspired by task runs of Super Smash Bros., it plays like a turn-based fighting game, with both players making their actions at the same time, leaning heavily into the rock-paper-scissors aspects that fighting games normally have. It is an important entry on this list because it shows just how unique a fighting game can be. Street Fighter VI, being released in 2023, is the most recent Street Fighter game. While I have some not-so-nice opinions of this game, I will not trash on it too much. This game features two main settings for each player, Classic and Modern. Classic is the usual 3 punch buttons, 3 kick buttons, with ranging power and motion inputs for special moves, while Modern has 3 attack buttons ranging in power and a special button, removing the need to do motion inputs. This inclusion started a trend of getting rid of special inputs in fighting games, which I and a lot of other people in the fighting game community are pretty against. Street Fighter VI also features a story mode that is very unique from other fighting games. Invincible Versus, said to release on April 30th, 2026, is an interesting fighting game. From what we have seen so far, it will have a max combo meter and will use a special button instead of input. I think that these inclusions are bad ideas, as a max combo meter seems like a mask for bad balancing, and the default special move button, with no downsides to using it, makes the game fall very flat in my eyes and the eyes of others. In conclusion, I and many others don't like the directions that fighting games are heading. More recent fighting games have been having their skill ceilings extremely lowered and have been removing one of the most loved mechanics in fighting games. While this video isn't meant to discourage you from enjoying any recent games like Street Fighter 6, or to discourage you from using modern controls, this is meant to take a stance against the gradual removal of special moves and the dumbing down of recent fighting games. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.